Right. Can't find pattern. Try harder. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I guess it should still have a copy constructor. That's bullshit. Hi guys. Perfect. Okay, it compiles. I made some progress finally, but what is next? That was the question. Again, my memory is failing because I did run into this crash before. Oh, it's just an assert. And then I started doing what I just did. So what is wrong? I think I should run it in the debugger. Probably gives me more a better idea of what it was. So we get here, and the sorted descriptor set layout bindings vector is empty. As it says here, length is 0. And it is empty because it's being passed to this function, empty. So let's go up in the stack, and now we see that we are calling it with an m sorted bindings that is empty. This is in the call, if in the member function realize handle of a set layout objects. Realize handle should create a handle, but there is nothing to create. I mean, you cannot create a descriptor set with 0 bindings. At least that doesn't make any sense. Hence the assert. So we're trying to realize a handle on a descriptor set layout that does have no binding. A descriptor set layout being a member of the m sorted descriptor set layouts vector, which I suppose has only one member. Let's print it. Or 4 members. 4 members. Yep, and the first one is a vector that is empty, and the second one as well, I guess. Second one is empty. And the third one is empty. And the fourth one has 1 entry. The reason that the first 3 are empty is because they are uniform buffers. They represent uniform buffers. And I did not implement that yet. So I've added something to m sorted descriptor set layouts without initializing them correctly. Where does this come from? That's a member of shader input data. You can go up. So we're calling on the shader input data here realize descriptor set layouts, plural, without having initialized the m sorted descriptor set layouts. Where are we now? I think I should have a look at the source code by now. Going up further in the stack probably does not make any sense. That was nonsense. Sorry. Thought it was one thing. Shape.input data. Yeah, the problem is that this function is not implemented. Add uniform buffer. If it would have been, then it would not only have added the top buffer to some set, but also add a binding to that set. A binding for the uniform buffer. Same with that one and same with that one. But what it currently does, it's only incrementing a set counter. Not even correctly. And it's not adding a binding. But we need a binding for each uniform buffer. So what I do is I reserve a binding. And that then worked when I hard-coded the bindings, the binding numbers. But that would be in here. And you see the hard-coded binding numbers, 0, 1, 0, and 0. And that's now commented out because it should be generated. And I'm already relying on it being generated, but it is not generated yet. It should have been generated in these functions. This one, add texture, which is very alike, does work. So maybe you can look at add texture, compare it with add uniform buffer, and then figure out what we have to do in add uniform buffer in order to add the binding. And once we have done that, we do no longer have to reserve it, because we're just going to add them in the right way. Okay, so here's add texture. What add texture is doing is I extract a set key. Set key is unique for the whole application. Key to basically every shader resource. So a texture is a shader resource, a uniform buffer is a shader resource. And each and every one has a unique ID. Then I should assign or find the actual descriptor set. That is, I get an index which then points to a vector with the information about the descriptor set. So it can be that different keys result in the same index. And that is then also the set number that you use in the shader. So I print out which number that is. Then it creates a shader resource object, many types of, but I'm only using two at the moment, a combined image sampler and a uniform buffer. But there's lots of uniform stuff that are called shader resources. I call it shader resource because there is a section in the Vulkan specs called shader resource types, and that lists all the types. I have the same list here because it's also listed as an enum. All these things. Sampler, combined image sampler, sampled image, storage image, uniform textile buffer, etc. Now the only thing I use is a uniform buffer and a combined image sample. But everything else is going to be possible in the end, I guess. And I call all of them shader resource. So we create a shader resource object which gets what I call a GLSL ID string. It's a string that I will use in my shader template code. That wouldn't compile because it is not shader code, but I'm going to pre-process my code and then replace it with some variable name that the GLSL, so the shader compiler will understand, plus add a declaration for it. I do tell it that it is a combined image sampler, which is given by the fact that this is a texture. And I pass which set index it is. So it could be set 0, set 1, whatever. That then is inserted in the map GLSL ID string to shader resource. So that's just simply a map that converts this string to the shader resource. So if then I am pre-processing my shader and I see that string, I'm just going to show an example of that. Let me put a marker here, say marker A. And this is not window.h. Open read only. So here's an example of shader code. And then I'm using stuff like this. Top position double colon X. This is a comment, but in the end it's just going to be this is going to be the line in the code, and this line is going to be generated. So I delete this and uncomment this, and then we have the real thing. So it's going to find this. This is my GLSL ID string. So that string then can be mapped to the shader resource object. Which object? Well, that one. The insert must be succeed, and then I'm adding it to a vector called shader variables. That's even more general than shader resource, because every shader resource is derived from a shader variable, and I have other things as well. Vertex attributes and push constants are also derived from shader variable. And they have their own GLSL ID string that I can find in the shader code. But then you will ask, where the hell am I adding the binding then? Well, the binding is added when I encounter those strings in the source code. So somewhere we are going to call a preprocess. Just typing it here so I can jump to it. Which is going to run over all those shader variables, where I just added it to. This is the vector with all the shader variables. We just added it to that. So it's going to get the GLSL ID string from each of them and find then that string in the source. If it occurs in the source, then count is incremented. And I'm looking for all the ID strings. If the count is larger than 0, then we encountered it at least once. And then we call this. Which means that for that shader variable, is used in is being called. AKA, we call shader variable is used in shader info stage, and that's going to return a declaration context, which we then store here. And then once we are done with all the shader variables, I'm processing all the declaration context here by calling generate on it, which then adds simply the declarations. This is a string. Yeah, string here. But for us at the moment, only this is important. So it's going to call is used in on the shader variables, if we add it to m shader variables. This is the push constants. Let's go to the texture, which is a shader resource. So for the texture and for the uniform buffer, we would get here. That then finds the declaration context and calls on the declaration context GLSL ID string is used in shadow stage. So if we found then this function, also a shader resource, but this time shader resource declaration context, GLSL ID string is used in, calls update binding if it is in a combined image sampler. I have not implemented yet adding a binding for a uniform buffer, but if we get there, then we should crash here and not where we do crash. So we probably never get here, and that's then the first problem. We should get here. So apparently GLSL ID string is used in is never called for uniform buffers, which should mean that we never get here, because if this function is called, then we definitely get here, right? This is being called if that's being called. So apparently we never call this for my uniform buffers, which means that either the string is not encountered, but it is, because I know I already have those strings in the shader source, or we're not looking for it. If we are not looking for it, so that if you're not looking for it, the count will stay 0 as well, of course, if you don't even have it. It's not being added to mShader variables. Now, this is the line where it is being added to the shader variables for a texture. But we call add uniform buffer. And, well, you already see it here. I'm not adding anything to mShader variables because it's commented out. So now we found the problem, or the reason that we are not crashing at the assert that I just found. The reason that this is commented out is because I commented out this line, and if you don't have res1, then you cannot compile this one, which uses res1. The reason I commented out the first line is because it tries to insert a pair with a GLSL ID string, but the GLSL ID string of the uniform buffer, where the uniform buffer is being passed as an argument to add uniform buffer. So that would be this thing here, which is this here, but I implemented that as a template that is derived from uniform buffer base, which contains my GLSL string. So here's the base, and that's my string. I think the conclusion is that this is wrong. For some reason, well, I'm not sure actually. These strings, let me type them out. Say the actual GLSL ID string of this thing is. Oh yeah, no, that it is correct. Let me show what top position is. Top position is a struct. The struct is what is being. Thank you. The top position is a struct, currently containing nonsense, but basically we can have any number of members in this struct. Let's say I fill the whole struct with sensible data, and then I just write the whole struct as one memory block to the uniform buffer. The uniform buffer is then written to or transferred to the video card, the GPU, and that the GPU can then read each of these members from the struct in the shader code. But each of them gets its own name. So this one has a GLSL ID string called top position : unused .1. This is just padding, so it doesn't exist. And this one has top position : X. I should be looking for these strings. I cannot just look for a top position. Double colons are not allowed in GLSL code. So if I find a string that has a double colon, then I just know that it's one of my personal invention GLSL ID strings. So I have to explicitly look for something with a double colon. Or what I could do is just look for this string. And then that doesn't matter if I find the unused or the X. But since I have to treat them differently, it's probably making most sense if I just add this one and that one both separately as a shader variable, as I call them. However, at this point, I don't know what those are. I don't know how many members this struct has. That it has an unused 1 and an X. And even if I did, how would I add that? How would adding one of them make sense? I would have to add all of them. And my shader variables, a shader variable just have one string and not multiple. So you would say the whole uniform buffer is not a shader variable. It exists of multiple shader variables. It's also confusing. So I didn't really know what to do, and I thought, well, you know what? All of them start with top position : top position is a struct. It's going to be unique. It's a C++ type. I might as well store just that to begin with in the uniform buffer. So that means that at the moment that, and that's what I'm doing. So at the moment that I call add uniform buffer, I'm getting well, the base class of that uniform buffer thing, which contains either multiple GLSL ID strings or just one being the prefix. And currently I'm going for the prefix, unless I later on I run into a problem that shows me that that is really the wrong approach. I wish you guys could hear the same music as I'm hearing. It's so good background music. YouTube sucks that they don't allow me to play some background music and talk through it. Morons. So please put on your own non-vocal, pure instrumental music as a background that you really like to get a good sphere. Or you could listen to the same music as me. I am listening to the DI.FM, so www.di.fm, and then to techno radio. And since I'm on Linux, I automatically have no advertisement. Well, if you install the right browser plugin. Should probably not have said that. Okay, let me see. Yeah, the problem is we only have the prefix, and we cannot have the whole string because there are really multiple strings. And that's not a problem at the moment that I create my shader resource and then maybe store that resource in a map under only the prefix. Because as soon as I find a complete string, I can just extract the prefix and then find the context for the whole uniform buffer struct under that prefix. But I still need and want to add all of the strings to my shader variables. So I am really looking for all of them. And that's what the fix me says. I need to add all GLSL ID strings. So let's do that. Long story. I think I lost 7 viewers during this explanation. Or maybe everyone just left to go to DIFM music. Let's see. So the GLSL ID string to shader resource, well, I only have a resource that has the prefix. So I have to add this using the prefix. Okay, so this is prefix, and I'm adding it to this map. It's a standard map from string to shader resource. That string is then, in this case, the prefix. So I can find back this one. That gives me the set number and the fact that it is a uniform buffer. I copied this from texture. The MGLSL ID string of each texture must be unique. That's why it has to be, it must always succeed. You don't want to insert something and then find out that it already exists. Then this is the only problem. I cannot add this, I think, which is kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Shader variables are shader variables is the base class of a shader resource. But I wanted to have all the strings, so I can look for all the strings, or should I maybe not? I don't know. So this is a vector of shader variable pointers, and shader variables should exist of the full name, not just the prefix. But now I have only the prefix in it. Yeah, well, look at this. It would be really wrong to have a shader variable that is not the full name. So where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong? So going forwards, I came to the conclusion that this had to be a prefix. If I go backwards and I start here, then I say, well, clearly I have to add the full strings to the shader variables. But what I'm adding is a pointer to an existing shader resource that was inserted in this map. This map contains shader resources. So that means that I have to add multiple shader resources, where each shader resource represents only a single member of the same uniform buffer. It's just so unlike textures. For textures this worked, but it's not how it works in general. Okay, so going backwards, I would say I need for each member of the struct of the uniform buffer, I need to add a shader variable, which means I also need to add multiple of them. To this map, which means that I simply need to create multiple shader resource objects and not just one. Which means that I need all the GLSL ID strings and not just the prefix. But I only have a single uniform buffer that is being added. Okay, so that seems to mean that I was wrong and I need to replace my uniform buffer GLSL ID prefix with a vector with simply all of them. All of the strings. I hate it that I feel uncertain about this. Sometimes, you know, the code itself just forces you to do the right thing. It just points in the right direction. And it makes it clear. And if you follow the right direction, your code simplifies, it collapses. Suddenly, all kinds of code duplication disappears. The code becomes simpler and you have the feeling, oh right, that was the way I should have done it. But I do not have that feeling here. Because what this is now telling me is that I have to, yeah, almost add duplicates. So that's how it feels. Suppose I add the whole uniform buffer only once, and I'm literally going to search for strings like top position colon without looking at the member. Then a lot of code that I already wrote is no longer really applicable. Is that the right word? Especially that preprocess code. I have to think about at least doing that and maybe just rewrite the stuff there. So let's say my shader variables now do not contain complete strings. They only contain prefixes. I can still find the prefixes. But then I need to replace the whole thing. But okay, every time I find a prefix, I can find the end till the end of the string. So I have the complete string. So I know how much it grows. And I can Okay, here's the problem. Then the match string, so that's in this case the full GLSL ID string, is replaced with whatever name returns. So this is replaced with that. And you can, that's a virtual function. So per shader variable, it looks like I only have one replacement string. So what I could do is just rewrite this or change it so that I'm looking only for prefixes. Then extract the name, the member name of the whole string, and then pass that to name. Because, for example, if you look at an implementation of name, and now I have to search because I probably have a billion name. Here's one. So that would work. For example, this one, for push constants, I replace whatever I find with a v followed by a hash that is calculated from the prefix, followed by a dot, followed by the member name. So if I would pass the member name as a string to this function, I could do the exact same thing, except that I would not pass the prefix, not have to call a prefix function to get the prefix. I would only have the prefix. It would be the only thing that I have. So I can still calculate that hash and then still append the dot and the member name, which is now passed. So that looks good. Let's go to the next name. And there's a shader info. What is it? Oh, whatever. Let's think shader resource name. Here's another one. Shader resource is made, same thing. It's made by underscore u prefix, which I have then. And then I can just append an underscore and member name, which is being passed. So it would still work. And then I only have one more, which is the vertex attribute. A vertex attribute uses the full thing. A hash of the full thing, but it's also worked. I can just put here the prefix that I have plus a double colon, doesn't even matter because I'm calculating a hash, plus the member name that I'm passing. So maybe that is the better way to do this. And yeah, all my shader variables should be changed to shader structs, or yeah, I can look at the struct as a variable maybe. That is kind of a big change, but I think it's necessary because otherwise I'm stuck. And if I do that, things suddenly become more logical, a shitload more logical, I must say. But it will require a lot of rewrites. I cannot do that before I go to bed, so. I can make a beginning now, but I don't think I will finish it within an hour. Though you never know. If once I know what I should do, then I start typing and I don't stop typing until it's done. So who knows, we can do this in 1 hour. Okay, I have a plan. The plan is there. Undo, redo. Let's do undo. Undo again. Redo again. That's also correct. Let's keep it like this. And here we have an I can leave it like that as well. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, I added these to, well, let's not add them. Before I make this change, which is going to be rather big, I have to commit what I have now, otherwise I get completely lost in the git diff. And that's boring, I'm afraid. I have to go through the diff and then decide what I want to add and what not. I have already gone through the diff once, I think. So let's just do a git add -p. Okay. Yeah, this is definitely what I want. I'm passing the struct name so that this template, which is before not a template, now it's a template, it can deduct all those struct names from it. So the unused one and the X. So yes. I commented this out because it's not going to be necessary anymore as soon as I fix this. So that yes. Get set index converts a key to an index by simply looking it up in the map, and it must exist. That looks sane. Here I replaced an assert false. It fixed me, it was not removed because it's still not completely correct, I think. Implement using preferred descriptor sets. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, there's a pseudocode that doesn't work yet, but it's better than an assert false. I have to convert one of those super unique keys to a set. Like I said before, the same key could refer to the same set. What I'm doing here, I give every key its own set, so that's definitely wrong. But it's a start, and I have to fix this later, hence that the fix me stays. I can commit this. I don't really like to commit it while it's broken code, but since the fix me is still there, I should find it back. And yeah, I think I'm gonna run into validation errors or shader compile errors that then will remind me probably immediately what is wrong and what I have to do. So that's okay to commit. Yeah, it's more like an attempt, really. The reason is I changed uniform buffer to a template, but I do not really want to duplicate all the assembly code that generates. So I did split it up into a base class and a template. And then I thought that the add uniform buffer function has enough with just the base, but that's not set in stone yet. Nevertheless, I'm just gonna commit almost everything, I think. Well, we talked extensively about this one. This really needs a big change, and I can commit it now, but in the end it's going to be rewritten almost. Hopefully I can find it back when I just commit it. For declaration. And that's get set index, just reading the map, I guess. Oop, U is nothing, yes. And then I have here, and also create was moved to that base. Extra debug output doesn't hurt. Print on is also in the base. New headers never hurt. A theme? I didn't know that had themes. Oh, this is a big one. Holy moly. Okay, yeah, that's a split up. The uniform buffer was split up in a base. So this is now detected. I added a prefix to the base, which was very dubious. I was talking about maybe needing a vector of that, or now I changed my mind and I'm going to only use prefixes. That's going to be so painful. How am I going to call the GLSL ID string prefix now just GLSL ID string without the prefix? Is the meaning of this going to be up till and including the double colon, but no further? I guess I have to think about that later. It's basically all broken code, if you ask me. I think I have more code that needs to be fixed than working code. I exaggerate, but that's how it feels like sometimes. You probably can even get rid of this now. This extracts the prefix from such a string, and then now I'm going to make a change where we only have prefixes, so that it would not need this anymore. So with pain in my heart, let's commit everything. Maybe I should commit to a new branch, just to remind me very strongly about the wrongness of all of this. Is that possible? Can I switch to a new branch before committing, but after already adding everything to the index? I think there's nothing that I will not add. But by now I've added so much stuff. Okay, I added everything. Which means that git div is empty, right? And the git status is saying that I added everything. I'm gonna remove the junk files. And I'm just curious what happens if I do git switch create, make a new branch that, well, what am I working on now? I'm just gonna call it uniform buffers. Well, that's still empty, but do we still have our index? Seems we do still have our index. That's interesting. Git branch. Yeah, so I can do git commit now, and then okay, work in process on uniform buffers. Committed half read not working code, because I am going to switch from having zero variables with full prefix member names to just prefix names, and use the member part only. haven't typed a commit message that long since at least a week. Don't believe me? Look at this. Vip, 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 vip. There's a not that short. Okay. We are empty. We can go do what I wanted to do. Yeah, let me think. No, it's Gordon's. Well, maybe you saw it, I think. I just have the standard IMG. If you can make it beautiful for me without that I have to put in a lot of time, then of course I want it. I would not like to spend, say, a week on making my IMG look good. Well, I have so many other things to do. But it's good for you that you have it working at all already. You started like IMG with today, and then now it already works with the theme. Oh my god. Yeah, big changes, big changes. Oh, that would be great. Can you clone my repository, compile it, and get it running? Which will only work on Linux. I forgot. Are you on Linux? I don't think you are. There must be a huge delay again. Type it. No virtual machine here. You have Linux. Well, you can try to compile it. Don't put too much time into it. But if you can compile it and run it, then then you can also test it. That would be nice. If you feel very secure about it, you can do a pull request, and I can just look at it to see if it works, of course. But if you can also test it, you can just make it work and then do a pull request. Maybe you can even cooperate. You become a co-author. You got to start somewhere, and that starting point is getting it to compile and run my test application. Okay, let me think. I'm closing my eyes, thinking. I think I'm going to redefine the term GLSLID string to the prefix with 2 colons behind it. Although I'm not really happy with string, then let's rename it also. I'm renaming it from GLSLID str to GLSLID prefix then. I could just not add prefix, just ID. But yeah, maybe prefix is slightly more correct. A benefit is that I'm not using that string yet. or GLSL ID prefix does not exist. I do have str prefix. So with these things I have to remove the str, because now everything is going to be a prefix. But on the other hand, it's a very painful change. The reason that this is so painful is because it's not one that I can what is the word? Dutch is doorvoeren. I cannot use the type safety of C++ or whatever you want to call it. So normally I make 50% of the changes, or 30, or even 10% of the changes. Then I start compiling, and then the compiler with its compile errors force me to adjust all the rest of the code. This change, however, is just a change of the contents of a string. So it's almost pure runtime, which means I cannot use the compiler errors to find all the places where I have to change things, which is almost undoable. Therefore, I want to rename my variables so that I will get compile errors based on the fact that every place that I didn't look at and made changes to will not compile because the names are different. So not only the contents of the variables have to be changed, but also the name of the variables. Otherwise I cannot keep track of what I have to do. That would be way too hard. I think that if I start with these and just remove the str, then I still don't know what I'm doing. It's probably better to start with these and change them into prefixes. And that in itself is not going to be very easy, I think. If only because it's going to be, well, I can this is grab sources, but then I grab only whole strings. This allows identifier characters at the beginning or the end, and this grabs my project sources. So now I want to grab my project sources for this string without underscore prefix behind it. I'm not interested in that. And then we get this. Well, that's only 2 pages, not even. Well, maybe I can make it manageable, semi-manageable, by looking at the files that are involved here. I'm going to substitute everything from the first column with nothing, and then sort it and make it unique. That's still quite a lot. I suppose it's logical that shared builder contains the most of them. This is recent code. I would rather start with old codes. And this is the least amount. Let's look at the pipeline stuff and then see if I can fix it. Although, I don't know. I'll just have to look at it, I guess. I wanted to do this in 1 hour, right? Let me try. Maybe I should talk less. Yeah, x64 of course. I'm not even supporting 32 bits. I might be old, but I'm definitely living in 2022. Fuck backwards compatibility. I'm going to put on music and my mic off and not look at the chat anymore because I have to concentrate on this. I want to do a session with serious concentration. Music. No more. Okay. It is unbelievable that I cannot find it back anymore. I'm sure I had a fix me comment. I just committed it. It's not in Git show. I don't understand. Where is it? I changed my mind, by the way. And instead of changing all the GLSL ID strings to a prefix, that was not a good idea. So instead, I just add the full GLSL ID strings of all the members of a uniform buffer struct to the uniform buffer. And now I want to change that code that I commented out and add stuff to the shader variables. It must be commented out. Where is a commented out shader variables? Not commented out, not commented out. This is just a comment. What the heck, man? Where is it? Don't tell me I deleted it. Maybe I did not comment it out, but I bet I added if 0 around it. If 0 and if. But it's just one file. Only shader input data. I just looked at it. Oh, actually, there's 2 files. But I looked at the .h. Let's look at this one. Why? Nope, that's also not it. I don't understand anymore. I don't understand it anymore. JC, help me. Your memory must be better than mine. I'm adding uniform buffers, and at some point I'm calling some member function of shader resource. What else can it have been? No, it's where I create a temporary shader resource. Okay, so at the very least I can grab for underscore temp. I think I remember that. Shader resource there it is. The texture, yeah, this is the line that I was looking for. I found it back and I put it between if 0. Here is what I was looking for. This is the line that I was looking for. How the hell could I not find that? Ridiculous. Okay, so we fixed that and now I'm going to add all of them. Let's fix this code. Fix this code. I'm going to do a for loop here and then add all the. Okay, this is in shader input data. Where is the shader input data? Let's make an auto cons reference of that vector. Call it GLSL ID strings equals uniform buffer. Now what would be more logical than that I called it that? What did I? I did. So that's a vector string cons reference. Might as well copy that. I'm not really a fan of this auto stuff, but it is not obvious what the type is. Okay, so now I can run over all the strings. Okay, I use auto here. non. You can do this, always correct. But I also don't like that. I don't know why I don't like it. Might as well do it. It's more like if you don't know what type it is. But I do know what type it is. It's just a standard string. I can use a reference, const reference. This is well, and then a single deal with ID string. Then I can create a shader resource from me. The deal as a ID string, as a C string. And this is a uniform buffer, and it's all the same index. Really? Yeah, sad but true. And then I insert it into the two, yeah, I guess. Not using a prefix. I have to be able to look it up, I guess. Wait, what was that? Just, I don't know what it was. Probably a string. No, seriously. This is a map containing a string. Yeah, yay, okay. The string of each uniform buffer member must be unique, and of course don't register the same uniform buffer twice. Well, that's good enough. Res second. Yeah. And then finally we can push it back. So now I have all of them in it. And it is before midnight, so if it worked, if it would have compiled, I would have made it. Well, it's still not midnight. What was the error? You cannot do auto and string at the same time. It's still not midnight, still not midnight, still not midnight. According to my clock anyway. Link, 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 link. I made it. 23:59 on my clock. Good, but does it work? I'm not going to bed yet. I have to test it. Now it's midnight. Okay, so if everything now works, we crash on another assert. Core dump on. We now core dump on this assert. That's not working. Yeah, I can't work with that. Just run it VT. This assert. Drum ruffle. Yes, yes. I think I'm going to bed because, yeah, I mean, isn't it beautiful? I did it in, I did not what I wanted to do, but at least I did it before midnight. I mean, I changed my mind halfway, and then I did what I changed my mind to. And we are asserting now on this line, so that's good. It's definitely good. Okay, I saw a lot of chat. Before I quit everything, I'm going to read it. Adam says, this man is creating advanced AI that is going to destroy the world. Shh, don't talk about that, man. I have a Matrix account. Install Matrix and meet me there. Okay, JC came back. I didn't notice it on. Oh, I think I just made a pretty nice theme for IMQ. Oh, we already had saw that. I should have seen that earlier because I had talked back here. I did talk back here. Are you on Linux? I meant I talk back my voice. Forking, cloning, change. Yeah, I scrolled back too far. Trial and error. Are you still there? Can you put up a link to the playlist? It's tunetank.com/epic. Volt asks, why are you in my recommendations? Well, YouTube has bugs too, I guess. Okay, I'm glad I read that back. What distro are you using? Are you asking me? I'm using Arch. In string vulkan I'm view.cxx was the style lines and I updated it on the pull request. Looks like Visual Studio, and Visual Studio looks good, so it does. Cannot really follow that line. Did you make a pull request to my repository? Yeah, it's a good question. Why would YouTube recommend me to anyone? I mean, the only reason that they do that, I think, is because people subscribe to me that are interested in the same kind of YouTubes that you are. Say, there's people that subscribe to and look at all kinds of YouTubes that has to do with C++. And then those people subscribe to my channel, and then YouTube's going to be like, hey, that must be a C++ channel, or at least it must be a channel that people will be interested in who look at those other YouTubes. That's why, that's how it works, I think. Right, I'm going to have a look at what your pull request. You seriously did a pull request? Type to it again. Links viewer. Pull request 1. Minor changes. Updated git ignore. What is /out? Is that a standard directory that is always used by Visual Studio or something? I would if it means that it's the build directory, I would call it build. You cannot rename it to build. BUILD. I think that would make more sense. My main problem actually is that my whole project is not compiling on Windows. So if you put Visual Studio related stuff in .ignore, I don't understand. You didn't compile this with Visual Studio. That should never work. That's some serious hard-coded stuff. Where do you get it? Holy moly. You know, I added a few colors as well, I have to admit that. Okay, but if you don't mind, I'm not going to add this, because you cannot even compile it with Visual Studio. It's a pure Linux thing. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I can at least check it out. I'm just not a fan also of hard coding a lot of constants like this. It would be nicer if this was just read from a file, and then, you know, people can install their own style and use that. So more of something like support for different styles, and then you can install your style that you like, and I can install my style, and etc. Instead of hard coding it. Is it not possible to do that? To read it as a file instead of hard coding it? You just said you saved it to a file. Let's look it up. I should go to bed though. Holy, what is this? So here is code for an IMG save style and load style. You do have to wonder though. Yes, it has a style editor. I guess he talks about it here. Must say I'm a bit puzzled. This is only seems to be only adding a load and save, but what use is adding a save if you cannot edit it? So there must be a built-in way to edit it. So why would you not mention that then? Or was it in the This looks like a style editor, which is inside the IMQ test window. So if you allow to open that, then you have an editor. And then you can add extra buttons, I suppose, to save it and load it later. Okay, I'm going to bed. Okay, it's getting later for you too. So for you it's also after midnight. Yeah, but my program does not give access to that, and then I would have to edit. Yeah, that show style editor. Okay, can this do that, and then you get a single button or something? I'm going to have a what is it called? A graphic settings thing. Currently I do not have any real user interface. So it's, I don't know. I would hard code maybe an application with a show style editor, and then I can create a style which I can load in other applications. But to continuously have test applications that allow you to edit the IMQ style, nah. Okay, good.